Hi, I'm Nikki Lowe, and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work, and life in a more successful and sustainable way. Welcome to this episode. I'm your host, Nikki Lowe, and today I'm talking about 3 Christmas burnout traps and how to avoid them. As Christmas approaches, it's meant to be the season of being happy, joyous and fun. We call it Merry Christmas after all. But for so many of us, it can actually lead to more stress and overwhelm. And I hear from so many women that they get exhausted and sick at this time of year. So I wanted to share with you 3 Christmas burnout traps and how you can avoid them, because this year more than ever we're probably feeling like we're on the brink of burnout, and Christmas has a way of taking the overwhelm up a notch as working mums. But before we dive in, I'd like to do a listener shout out to Sabu2474. I think I've got your name right there, and you've put on iTunes so much wisdom. You've said loving the podcast, navigating the challenges of work and motherhood can feel so overwhelming at times. It's so reassuring to hear that I'm not alone in the struggles and all the guilt too. So much helpful wisdom shared through this podcast. So Sarbej2474, firstly, it makes me so happy to hear that you love the podcast. Thank you for choosing to listen, as I'm always aware that there are a million different ways you can spend your precious time, and it means the world to me that you choose to listen to this show. And I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to share this review on iTunes. I'm glad that you're finding the wisdom that my guests and I share useful and reassuring, and that's what this podcast is all about. And it makes me happy it's having that impact for you and others. Could you do me a huge favour, please? Can you share this episode with 2 or 3 working mums that pop into your head as you listen? My mission is to support as many working mums on their journey as possible. And so I'd be so grateful if you supported them by offering them this free podcast. I hope it's useful for you, this episode. And if it is, please could you pass it on? And please could you consider rating and reviewing my show? Your review can help other people find my podcast, so you'll be helping another working mum find this resource. Plus, I love to go in and read them. All you need to do is click the review and rate section in iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast, and let me know what the favourite part of your podcast is. Thank you. And let's get back to the 3 Christmas burnout traps and how to avoid them. So the first burnout trap number 1, is all about the price of perfectionism. We've all heard the song, it's the most wonderful time of the year. And that can sometimes be true. But what is absolutely true is that it's the most time of the year, the most expectation, the most obligation, the most busy, and the most full of emotion. And especially this year when we're carrying the impact of the pandemic and probably a cancelled Christmas last year. And it's easy to create an image in our heads of how Christmas is meant to be. How happy you're meant to be, how gorgeous your home is meant to look, how your children are meant to sit so perfectly in their matching Christmas pajamas watching Christmas movies, how perfectly dressed you're meant to look on Christmas Day, and how the perfect Christmas dinner table is meant to look, and that kind of list goes on. The problem is that the thing we're striving for isn't what we actually want, but what the movies or the advertisers have created for us. So how do you avoid this burnout trap of trying to create the perfect Christmas? Firstly, it's reminding yourself that perfectionism doesn't exist. And in fact, it's self-destructive. And it's something I have to remind myself of. It's really easy for me to get caught up in the perfectionism trap, as I know it is for so many of you listening. But it's the thing that will put a wedge between you and having a happy Christmas. So once we've kind of reminded ourselves that perfectionism doesn't exist, it's then about self-sourcing, like going inside and creating from internally, not externally. That's what I mean when I say self-source. It's about self-sourcing what is nourishing or fulfilling or wholesome Christmas would be like for you. And just notice that I've not used words like happy, because to expect the whole of Christmas to be happy is in itself an unhelpful expectation. So this is about going inwards and asking yourself what's really important. How would you like Christmas to look if you were being guided internally? And how can you navigate Christmas using your values? It's almost like let that be the North Star that guides you this Christmas, not some advertiser's and movie maker's opinion of what makes Christmas special. And it takes conscious intention to unhook from those perfection messages we get, particularly around this time of the year. I know it's something I have to keep coming back to make sure I don't fall down that perfectionism rabbit hole. And I hope this first tip reminds you too. And burnout trap number 2 is being a merry martyr. It's kind of ironic that Father Christmas is male, as the Christmas magic tends to be generated by us women. Research indicates that the additional workload that Christmas brings mainly falls to women in a household, whether it be decorating the tree, buying and wrapping Christmas presents, buying, writing and delivering Christmas cards, sorting the nativity costumes and the school social diary for the 1,000,001 festive activities, doing the Christmas food shop, cleaning the house if you've got visitors coming, if we're allowed this year, cooking Christmas dinner and cleaning up after the Christmas craziness. Our festive to-do list can leave us feeling kind of overwhelmed and anxious, with many of us finding that the only way to achieve all these expectations with an already jam-packed diary is by sacrificing our sleep. And when we're already busy working mums, these additional obligations can tip us into being what I call a merry martyr. And I speak from experience when I say this. I can fall into being a merry martyr quite easily if I'm not careful. And the definition of a martyr is someone who is made to suffer because of their beliefs and is admired and respected by people who share those beliefs. So this time of year, many of us can sacrifice ourselves and our sanity for others, while ignoring our own needs and actually thinking that we're doing the right thing when we're doing this. Can you relate to that when I say it? If you can, the first step in avoiding becoming a merry martyr is to recognise and meet your own needs. And that sounds so simple, but I know for the work that I do with all of my clients, actually recognising your needs can be really difficult as a starting point, let alone meeting them. So when the festive season is all about doing other things for other people, it's easy to forget your own needs in there. And when you fall into the martyrdom trap, it's really when we put others' needs first at the detriment of our own. So how can you identify and meet your own needs? And the first step really is by taking responsibility, because actually just taking responsibility to say, I need to identify them and it's only me that can meet them. And when I say meet them, it might be about actually communicating them so other people can help you. But ultimately, it's our responsibility to acknowledge them and do what we need to make them kind of be okay. So what might you need to give yourself permission to do this Christmas? Is it saying no to an invitation that you feel that you ought to say yes to? Is it about putting some boundaries in place that take care of your sanity and well-being? Is it about releasing or reimagining holiday traditions that you've perhaps carried for years that mean that you can create less pressure and work for yourself? And this might involve you stepping out of the paradigm of motherhood that you see in our society. And what I mean by that is, we see on social media and in the movies what other people are doing, and somehow we swallow that as something we have to do to be a good mother or a good person, particularly at Christmas. Or it may be stepping back from something you've experienced in your own family of origin. It was just what kind of life was like for you at Christmas with your caregivers and family. A big part of what enables us to thrive as working mums is when we can free ourselves from the box that we found ourselves in. That box of what a good mother is and does. And, it goes wider than that. But let's just stay with that for a moment and start to create our lives from the inside out. So if you're multitasking to this, I want you to just stop for a moment. Just pause and ask yourself, what's the one thing I need this Christmas to flourish? And by flourish, I mean not sacrificing yourself at the altar of Christmas magic, but recognise that the true magic comes from being able to show up for yourself and your family in a loving and calm way. So now we move to Burnout Trap number 3, and it's all about the cost of overgiving. Christmas is a time when we love to give presents, and I get it, I'm a giver and get such a sense of happiness when I'm giving to others. But there can be a shadow side of giving that we often don't talk about in our culture. We can fall into the trap of thinking that giving is a morally good thing. So giving as much as we can is really something to be admired and to be proud of. And while logically we may know that overgiving can mean that we're overspending or spoiling someone, there's so much more to it than just that. Overgiving can mean that we're not paying attention to our boundaries, either giving too much financially, but actually giving too much energetically. And that's, something that we often overlook. Real giving is done from a place of true generosity. And because we have the excess of something to give, whether that be our time, our support, our energy, and the giving leaves us feeling good and energized long term, and not just that short term high of being the giver. Overgiving tends to come not from generosity, but actually from a hidden need. It's kind of an energetic transaction where we expect a return, even if that's just praise or appreciation or recognition, or to stop feeling guilty. And when we give too much, we feel depleted and not energized. And we might even feel annoyed at ourselves or resentful towards the other person. So when we overgive, we are generally giving because we perhaps hope for a return on what we give. There's a secret contract. I'm giving you this because I actually want something back, probably, the same amount of care and attention. It might be that we want to be appreciated or loved, or we need to feel good about ourselves. Or we perhaps want to be seen as the better person, or we think nobody else is capable of doing it, so we have to. Or if we give, we will ease a feeling of guilt. When we overgive, we give because we think we should or we have to. So essentially, we go against ourselves and kind of overstep our own personal boundaries. And this can result in those feelings of being upset with ourselves or frustrated at somebody else. And ultimately, it damages and lowers our self-esteem. And actually, overgiving can be a sign of codependency. When we're codependent, we kind of take our sense of self from pleasing others. We give too much in order to receive something back, as I say, whether it be praise or attention. And that we feel that gives us a feeling of self-esteem, but it's actually ungrounded and unsustainable self-esteem because it doesn't come from within, but it's relying on an external factor. I'm only enough if I give enough. And we're often given time and energy that we don't have to spare. And this can mean we put our own needs last, which again can leave us angry at ourselves and trip us into that martyrdom that I spoke about in Burnout Trap 2. So how can you make sure that you're not overgiving? Well, the first step is just paying really exquisite attention. So each time you notice the desire to give, just check in with yourself and be honest. What is my real intention here? Am I doing it to be liked, to be loved, to be approved, or whatever that might be? And what do I really need here? Am I overgiving instead of having the courage to say what I need to say or ask for what I really need? And check in the impact of overgiving. Systemically, we talk about overgiving or overhelping can weaken a system. I may have mentioned on this podcast before, about 10 years coming up for 10 years ago, I started to train in systemic coaching, and it just opened up my eyes to the wider system in which we operate in, and that everything we do or say actually has an impact on the wider system. And one of the principles of systemic thinking is that if we overgive to a system, we can actually weaken it. So if we overhelp, we might make the other person helpless. Or if we overgive, we can leave the receiver in this kind of unconscious debt to us that could be unhealthy. So this Christmas, make sure your giving is done from a place of true generosity, not overgiving, and that true generosity is about you have excess of something to give. That way you can stay grounded in this kind of true loving presence rather than getting caught up in the material presence. So there are my 3 Christmas burnout traps and how to avoid them. Just to recap, Burnout Trap 1 was avoiding the price of perfectionism by reminding yourself that perfectionism doesn't exist and is in fact self-destructive. And it's the thing that will put a wedge between you and having a happy Christmas. Then it's about self-sourcing what a nourishing, fulfilling, wholesome, or whatever word works for you, what that kind of fulfilling Christmas would be like. Burnout Trap 2 was avoiding being a Merry Martyr by taking responsibility for your needs so you can free yourself from martyrdom that this time of year can really create. And Burnout Trap 3 was avoiding the cost of overgiving by checking in with yourself and being honest. Am I overgiving in my time, my energy, my money, material things, or am I doing grounded, generous giving? I hope you found the insights into these 3 traps useful. And thanks so much for hanging out with me in this episode. And could you do me a huge favour, please? Can you share this episode with 2 or 3 working mums that pop into your head as you've listened? As I've said, my mission is to support as many working mums on their journey as possible. And I'd be so grateful if you supported them by offering this free podcast. I hope it's been useful for you. And if it has, can you pass it on to another working mum or 2, please? Thanks so much for tuning in and wishing you and your loved ones a peaceful Christmas. And I hope this episode helps you to show up for yourself in a loving way so that you can be there for your loved ones in the way you want to too. Take care. If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too, so if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.